So, without further ado, it is my huge pleasure to welcome you to our event this morning and the first workshop on SEN support and EHCPs will begin shortly. So the first session is on EHCPs, SEN support. I'd like to introduce Jenny Maxwell, Assistant Principal Educational Psychologist, and Mary Taylor, Service Manager for SEND, who'll be presenting this workshop on SEN support and EHCPs. And I remind everybody that we won't be able to take questions during this workshop, and it is being recorded so that anybody not able to attend will be able to watch it at a time of their choosing. Jenny, can I now hand over to you to begin your slides for the next 15 minutes, please?
Yes, thank you. I'm really pleased to be here. So I'm Jenny Maxwell, Assistant Principal Educational Psychologist, and Mary and I are going to share this kind of information and I'm going to start off by talking about the educational psychology team, and clearly we have a really big role in terms of education and healthcare assessments and plans. But it sits within a wider framework of how we work. So if I could have, can I move the slides on, Stuart, or do you need to do that?
Thank you, Jenny.
Okay, so I think the first thing is to say that I've put we're a team of 20. That's a bit hard. It's a bit more complicated than that because there's quite a lot of part-time people, but our full-time equivalent is about 20 EPs across the city, and our wide remit is about using psychology to support children and young people and their families. And I like to think that our goals are really closely aligned with parents and carers. And what we want is for children to learn as well as they can and to be happy and thrive and make progress. And it's absolutely key for us to work closely with parents and carers in order for that to happen. Thank you. I wanted to just give a little bit of information about the range of things that we do so that you know how the educational psychology team work and what else we cover. So every maintained school in Bristol has a link EP, and I think that's part of us really valuing the relationships that we have with schools and knowing schools well. So each school and your child's school will have a link EP, somebody that we try and keep some continuity with, somebody who gets to know your school and that school is able to make to get in contact with if they've got queries or things they want to ask about. I'm really sorry about having put this as initials rather than having sort of spelt it all out, but we're also involved with early years work. So we work with children from 0 to 25. So in line with the Code of Practice, we cover the full range that the Code of Practice for SEND covers. We do training for SENCOs. We see that as a really and not just SENCOs, but staff in schools. We see that as a really important way of making sure that the Code of Practice is delivered as effectively as possible. That's an important part of our work. And we also do critical incidents and sad events. So sometimes there is a death, maybe of a child in a school or in a setting, and sometimes or of a parent. And we've also had quite a few stabbings in Bristol, and so really kind of traumatic incidents. And where that's affected a school community, we support that as well. But the majority of our time is spent on psychological advice and information for education, health and care needs assessments, and that's that takes up a really considerable amount of educational psychology time. And the other bit we do is work in schools where schools buy our time in, and that they can use in flexible ways. But we are we're really conscious of being able to support children and young people, not just through education and healthcare plans, but at other stages of the code of practice. So making sure that early intervention and good support in schools is where most children with SEND kind of get their support. Thank you. Have the next slide, please. And so in terms of that, I wanted to sort of say a little bit about how we, with a focus on early intervention, what we want schools to be able to do is notice what children need really early, and to use effective ways of assessing children, to sort of pinpoint what it is they're finding difficult, or where their support needs are, and for schools to put in place excellent support and intervention. And I think there are lots of children that can be supported well at that stage of the code of practice. So I've put down some examples about where, you know, what we'd be thinking about first is how to support children with a sort of early intervention. So, for example, a primary age child who's not making progress. What an educational psychologist might do is just have a discussion with the school, because they're worried that they've got a group of children or a couple of children that they think aren't making progress and could make progress. And that might be really just kind of thinking about what the school's literacy support is like, and what things they do, what interventions they use, and how effective those are being. So that wouldn't even require us being involved with an individual child, but it might be much more complicated than that, and it might need some unpicking. So that's where we would maybe look at things like whether a child had difficulties with working memory, or whether it was about motivation, or whether there was phonological difficulties. And so we'd help the school, working with parents as well, to really look at what's happening if a child's not making progress. And then we might have work with children who've got really complex needs, and often they will have an education healthcare assessment quite early, and we might be doing some very detailed work with them, things like VIG, which is video interactive guidance, which looks at how the adults working with the child can really sort of pinpoint what's effective by looking at video clips of interactions between a child. And the final example that I put is a secondary age child who's found a transition from primary difficult. And that's been a real issue this year with COVID, because lots of children didn't have the kind of transition package that they would have had usually. And so one of the things that we found is that children going into secondary have had a difficult start, and what we've wanted to do is to support the school looking at things like the relationships with children, especially when they're establishing new relationships, or maybe thinking about needs that were not so evident in primary but are now much more an issue. And that's often things like listening and attention skills, because the amount of information in secondary tends to be a big hike. So I suppose what I want to show is a range of things that we do, including education, healthcare assessments, but actually lots of the time what we hope to do is support children so that they can do well in school without an education healthcare plan. Thank you. We're really aware that the way our education healthcare plans have been done in the past hasn't met parents' needs, and hasn't involved our young people and children in a person-centred way. And we're working really hard to make some big changes to the way we collect information, so that it's both more accessible, and so that children and young people and their families are much more at the heart of that process. And what we've been using for that is something called a path. So we are piloting that at the moment. to try and move away from a very bureaucratic approach to education and healthcare assessments and plans to a much more family and child focused way of doing it, using visuals, still writing reports, but including things that really matter for a child and young person as part of that work. And I've put up this visual. This is a path, planning alternative tomorrows with hope, which is a person-centred planning way of working that we're trying to integrate with our education healthcare plans. And my final slide is a series of quotes from parents who have been through this a path as an education healthcare plan or as an assessment rather than a traditional way of collecting information. And this is another local authority that has changed the way they work, which is Hampshire. But I think those quotations for me really kind of capture how possible it is that doing things differently would kind of change people's experience of going through education healthcare assessments and the issuing of an education healthcare plan. Okay, that's the end of my bit. Mary, I'm going to hand over to you.
Thanks, Jenny, and don't worry, Stuart, I know I've only got 5 minutes. So I'm
really sorry.
And everybody will have access to these slides anyway. So my name's Mary Taylor, and I'm the service manager for the statutory SEN assessment, planning and review team. And it's great to be here with you all. Next slide, please. So this slide basically highlights what does the statutory SEN team do. And we are responsible on behalf of the local authority of carrying out its statutory duties. So that includes the Children and Families Act, SEN regulations and the Code of Practice. We obviously cover the birth to 25 age range, and we are involved with any child or young person who may comes towards us if they may have special education needs and may need a specialist provision. So we deal with needs assessments and also then maintaining all the education, health and care plans for children and young people who live in Bristol. Next slide, please. So what does the SEN team do? So the SEN team covers a wide range of activities, but that includes some of this on the list. So it includes carrying out needs assessments when we receive a request, maintaining education, health and care plans. So that's making sure that annual reviews are carried out and that obviously we're working to improve the quality of those. We also support children and young people with SEN and families. We now have allocated caseworkers for every SENCO in Bristol, so they all have a link to the SEN team so that we can support them. And also we work across all other professionals that are involved in your child or young person's education, health and care plan. So we are very much coordinators. And also we allocate specialist placements within Bristol. Next slide, please. So how do you access the service? So really those that would come into be involved with the statutory SEN team would be if you're applying for a needs assessment or you already have an education, health and care plan. So really your first protocol would be through your SENCO rather than ringing the team direct. But if you are going through a needs assessment or you have a caseworker or you already have an education, health and care plan, then I've put there our email address. So then that will go to the right person within our team. And we are working really hard to ensure that everybody with an EHCP has an allocated caseworker. We've had a little bit of movement within the team, particularly due to COVID, but that's our aim, is that you would have an allocated caseworker. So you would have their contact details so that you can contact them direct. Next slide, please. So needs assessment. So it was a case, I think the question was, is there a waiting list to access our service? So there isn't a waiting list to access the SEND team. The way that, as I say, that you access the team is either through a needs assessment. So I feel it's only pertinent at this point to say, obviously, the needs assessment process is a 20-week process. But, and obviously it's well known that due to the volume of those requests, we aren't always able to meet that 20-week deadline. However, it doesn't mean that we aren't trying really hard, not just the SEN team, but all professionals in the process, to try and reach that time scale. And then, to be fair to all our families, we are making sure we work across all the cases, so that if we have missed that 20-week, it doesn't mean we're not working on those cases. We absolutely are. And we also prioritise children that are in care and those going through key stage transfer, that age at the moment, because we are absolutely aware that it's really important that plans are available ready for September. Next slide, please. And so the other aspects that we're working on are annual reviews. So we are working really closely in partnership with our schools. As I said, we've now got caseworkers allocated to every SENCO. So we are really working in partnership with them to ensure that annual reviews are carried out. We improve the quality of the review, improve the quality and timeliness of those reviews as well. It's really important that we hear the voice of the child and the young person during those reviews, which is exactly what Jenny was showing through the path way of having a meeting, and also really raising everybody's awareness that for those age 14 and above, it's really, really important that we think about the future and how do we prepare them for adulthood, and what independent skills can we support, so that when they leave education, they can go on to live gloriously ordinary lives within our community. Thank you, Stuart.
Thank you so much, Mary and Jenny. I really appreciate all that you've done to present that for us today, particularly in such a short period of time. And you've done brilliantly keeping to time. Thank you both so much. Okay, everybody, it is 10:55, and with a huge sigh of relief, I'm delighted to be able to introduce Alice Davis Avery, who is team manager of the Pathways to Independence team, and we're presenting this workshop on the transitions team and pathway to independence. Just need to remind everybody that we won't be able to take questions during this workshop. It is being recorded so that anybody who hasn't been able to attend will be able to watch it at the time of their choosing. Alice, it's my pleasure to be able to hand over to you for the next 15 minutes. Thank you for coming to the rescue. And just let me know when you want me to advance slides for you.
Lovely, thank you, thank you. Thank you for inviting me. As you know, my name is Alice Davis Avery. I am the team manager of the Pathway to Independence team, which is based in adult services in Bristol City Council. We are in essence the transition team, but working with young people when developing the team, they didn't feel transition meant a lot to them. So they developed and designed Pathway to Independence team and this lovely logo that we have around our team. Next slide, please. So these are the questions we were asked to answer, which I know Stephen has gone through: the who, what are we, and how do we do it. I won't read everything through on these, or it will take too long, but hopefully you can look at them after if you need to. Next slide, please.
Sorry, Alice, there's just a bit of a lag between the
That's okay.
That's okay.
So here is the team. We are a team who support young people and families through that transition from children's services into adult services, which many parents and families see as that kind of cliff edge, that gap in service. And so the team was developed a year ago, just about a year ago, mainly in lockdown, to try and fill that gap and create for you a much smoother pathway through into the services that yourself and your young people require. It's 5 social care practitioners or transition coordinators, and myself as the team manager. We sit in adult services, but we work across a lot of service, but we work very closely with children's, adults and the SEN service so that we can support and influence coordination of the plan into adulthood. As I'm sure many of you know, that's a very difficult time. It's a very anxiety-provoking time. And our aim is to try and make that as smooth as possible. We're usually based at the park in Knoll West, and we are co-located with the Preparing for Adulthood team, which is the other adult team that we work with 14 to around 18, and that team work with 18 to 25. So we've got a very close relationship right across that specific transition into adult services. Next slide, please. Who is eligible for the service? The legislative framework around this service is that we should be looking at young people in year 9, so around 14, as my colleague Mary mentioned earlier, and really start to focus on what are the long-term goals.
I don't think she would cope, but I didn't feel comfortable in there, so.
So we've got somebody speaking over Alice's session. I just need to, I think that's Helen. I'm just going to mute you, Helen. But apologies,
okay.
Alice.
That's all right.
Please carry on, Alice.
Yeah. So the legislative framework is around, we need to start having a much stronger focus on younger people from 14 and starting those conversations with them. So eligibility for the services, those young people around 14, year 9, with special educational needs and or are disabled who require support around the transition into adulthood. There's also part of that legislation that focuses on making sure the families and the community around them also have the right support and information and signposting, so they are less anxious and can support their young people into adulthood. And we also provide advice and support to professionals. So those people that are already working with you as a family, how can we provide support around this very complex area of transitional planning? Next slide, please. The aims of the service are to ensure that young people have an informed and smooth transition, and this is all the different aims that we looked at when creating the team. It's about intervening as early as possible. It's about starting at the moment at 14, as I said, and planning ahead, looking at what does that young person really want? What are their aspirations, not just for the following year, but for 5-10 years into adulthood? And then working back and creating a transition plan. So we capture their aspirations and where they want to be and how they see their adulthood by working on very small steps with them and the family to increase their independence and work towards those goals. We don't create this plan in isolation. This plan is to feed into their EHCP, their Children in Need review or Children in Care review, school review, so that we start to build on the plan they already have, but to give it a further reach, more of a view to where do they want to be, what jobs do they want to do, where do they want to live, what community do they want to live in as they become older and move into adulthood. Sorry. Our aim is to provide an access point so the right information is provided at the right time through a central kind of hub around transitional planning. And by doing so, hopefully reducing that stress. We want to be working with families at an earlier age, so that their young people aren't getting to 16 and 17 and the situation feels very anxious. So you can be informed, you know what might be coming up, you know what services might be available. And because we were in adult services, we're aware of what's available and can advise you and support you and signpost you on those. We want to support a rich and fulfilling life and with equal life chances. I feel very strongly that I want the team to be able to provide for young people and their families so that it isn't more difficult. And how can we make it easier for you to be able to feel confident about that process and about the journey into
small group is still much more advanced than what Gracie is. Does that make any sense? So that's
Alice, apologies. I don't know why Helen's microphone keeps clicking in. Are you ready for me to move on to the next slide, Alice? Alice, I think we've lost you. Are you able to unmute yourself?
Hello, can you hear me now?
Now, good grief! I can't believe technology is working against us so strongly today.
It's in and out. Let's go on to the next slide.
There we go. It's coming.
So very briefly, 3 levels of support, 3 tiers if you like. The first tier is about support when you need it. We have a transition information point. We call it the tip service. It's there 5 days a week during working hours. There's someone always at the end. At the moment it's emailed only due to COVID, but we usually have a phone line. And if you've got any queries, any questions around transitional planning, around adulthood, the pathway, referrals, then you can contact us and we can give you advice, signpost you, and give you support around those areas. We have a tier 2, which is a lot of families, as I'm sure you know, have a lot of professionals already around you and working with you, and sometimes it's not appropriate for another person to be involved. So we can work alongside the professionals already involved to steer that plan, to make it as preparing for adulthood independent focus as possible. And tier 3, which is the bulk of the work that we do, is to actually complete a transition assessment and plan with the young person, with the family, which is a home or a virtual visit. We will make the assessment with you, and that's creating a picture of what that young person wants. If we have difficulties with communication, we obviously work with families as well. So depending on the level of need, we can work with whoever is there in that community to create a transition plan. We'll then work alongside you to review that plan and support you into adult services in whichever way you and your family feel is best for you. Next slide, please. So the transition plan, very briefly, is about focusing on the outcomes and focusing on smart outcomes. I'm really strong about making sure outcomes are smart, so that when we work with young people in the family, they can recognise when they've reached success and we can celebrate those success. So if we have very small steps towards independence that are very clearly set out, when those are reached, we can look at coming back, reviewing how we work with you, what else support we can provide, and moving towards those longer term aspiring goals that we've set out in the plan. What we hope is this will reduce anxiety around that transition. It will improve confidence and independence and maximising that independence for those young people. Next slide, please. Is there a waiting list? Was the question. We do have a waiting list. We are working with around 124 young people at the moment, and we have about 36 young people on our waiting list. We do prioritise young people who are closer to that transitional phase, and we have approximately 20 young people each year that are 17 moving into adult services, where we can then pick up more young people to work with. We also try and prioritise those living away from home that may require more coordination, joining up to ensure that that transition plan is really embedded into the wider plan. If you are on the waiting list, if you're linked with us, or you want to refer to our service, we still have, as I've mentioned, the tip service, and we will contact you back within 24 hours. So if you email us, we will get back to you as soon as possible, and we can signpost you to support in any of these 4 key areas. And this is the National Preparing for Adulthood framework that you can find online, and we look at each of these 4 areas to look at how can we develop them and how can we maximise the young person's independence in each of those areas. Next slide, please. This is how you contact us. As I said, the phone number isn't working at the moment, unfortunately, but hopefully we'll do soon. But please do email us. We take referrals from professionals that come through a transition planning meeting we have monthly, which is a place where we can talk about the young person, obviously with your permission and the young person's permission, to look at advice from a wide range of professionals working in that field, and we will pick up referrals. For parents and young people, you can make a referral, again, via the email or the telephone number, and we will contact you back and go through the information we require and ensure that we have consent from the family and the young person. We are working on a clearer online referral process, but having only been running a year with about 6 weeks before lockdown, that's still a work in progress, but it will all be posted on the local offer as we develop more around our services. Thank you very much.
Alice, thank you so much. I'm so pleased you were able to make it and deliver that for us. I am incredibly grateful. Kate, I'll now hand over to you to deliver your workshop, and please just tell me when you want me to move the slides on for you.
Great, thank you, Stuart. So yes, thank you for that introduction. So I'm Kate Markley, and I'm the Children's Social Care Lead in Bristol City Council. Next slide, please. So as all of us are doing, the questions that you've asked us about is who is eligible, what we do, what services are available, how to make contact with us, the waiting list, and how long it is before you can expect to hear from our service. Next slide, please. So who's eligible is all children are eligible 0 to 25 in the city, should have access to their local community services, be included in their environment and have independence, and we're here to support that. So in social care, we are split into 2 areas, the under 18s, which is the social care lead, who is myself. Alice has already presented before me about the Pathway to Independence team, who I always refer to them, they're the bridge. They're the group that can bridge between children and adult services for families and professionals and help steer that thinking of a pathway to adulthood and independence. And adult care services are responsible for 18 to 25-year-olds in the service. Next slide, please.
I promise you, I'm not asleep here. There is just a lag before the slides move on.
Oh, that's okay. Don't worry, don't worry. So we offer a whole range of services now, and they've expanded in the last year. So before any statutory services required, we have a FLORA team, which is the Family Local Offer Resource and Advice team. And this team was created last year as we recognised that it was really important to have someone to talk to and to listen to you and be alongside you and help you navigate the systems across health, education and social care. The FLORA team is a work in progress. At the end of the email, I've got contact links for you. It's a pilot team in the sense that we actually want to hear from parent carers about how you would like that team to be going forward. What we've currently got at the moment is 5 social care practitioners that are leading on focus groups. They're phoning parents and doing supportive conversations. They're doing signposting. And during the COVID pandemic situation of last year, they did lots of phone calls to parents with children with education, health and care plans to understand and support some of the systems around access to education. Any information you'd like about FLORA, there will be an email address and please phone in. And it's exactly the same with Alice's Preparing to Independence team. Unfortunately, due to the COVID pandemic, and I'm sure you can all appreciate lots of people having to work at home, we are doing things via email and then we call you back. Lots and lots of organisations are now working in that way. Obviously, our child protection services are still through the front door and that still is business as usual. The other things we do in social care is we've got some group workshops taking place for parent support. We've got family support workers who can come into your home for a set period of time and you would have an identified action plan of how we were going to support you and your child. We have inclusion workers and their role is to help your child access their local activities. And sometimes that's about working with local groups such as guides and brownies to support the leaders of those groups to feel confident in being able to support your child in taking part in that. We have targeted short break activities for children with particular needs, and that's on the local offer. And we're the social care part of the education, health and care plan. We also have oversight of Alice's team, which she's talked to you about before. We have a safeguarding and child protection role. We have the OT team, which is for equipment and safety, unfortunately not for sensory support, and that's held within health. And we are the specialist short breaks team for the overnight short breaks and direct payments. Next slide, please. So how do you, what are we able to offer? So I've broken this down into open services to all. So the local offer has a range of activities, and I've been informed yesterday that the Easter holidays activities are going to be advertised on the local offer next week. And you can access these activities without any assessment at all. It's a self-referral process, and I've put the link in the PowerPoint. Bristol Autism Team Family Hub offer parents a number of courses, and again, they're all on the local offer, and there's a range of support there. We also have our inclusion service. As I've said, that's if your child has an education, health and care plan and you'd like support with accessing your local service, you need no further assessment. You can contact our inclusion service, and we have our OT service for equipment or any other assessment you would like, and they have an online referral form too. So everything is available to you without any child in need statutory assessment. Next slide, please. So services after an assessment. So if you feel that your child and your family would like to have an assessment for a specialist provision, such as a direct payment or an overnight short break at the Bush and Bellbrook or Family Link Carers, an assessment is needed first, and this is a statutory child in need assessment, and a social worker completes that assessment with you. The assessment will look at the support you already have, how we can add support from your local resources, and how your child can participate, and the networks that are available around you. If your child is assessed as needing additional specialist support, this will be linked into the Education, Health and Care Plan and reviewed every 6 months to make sure we're meeting your child's needs. And this also ensures that all the professionals around your child are joined up together. And we know that children change over time, and the resource that you might need from us may change over time. And that's why it's really important that we review alongside with you to make sure we're meeting your needs. Every plan we have is co-produced with you and your child. Next slide, please. So how to contact and access the service? Well, for under 5s or those that have recently been identified as having additional needs, we would really like to hear from you. This year, we've started to build an early identification register. So we have an early identification team, and this is all part of the Flora team. So if anybody is out there, health professional, family member, and they think this child has got additional needs, we'd really like to hear, and we'd like to hear about how we can design that service going forward. As I explained earlier, this is a pilot project, and we think that there are some seldom heard families and parents out there that can probably tell us how we can best design what we do to support families at the earliest point. So please, we'd love to hear from you. If you would like a child in need assessment, you can contact us through the online system. And I know this sounds quite daunting when it says report a concern about a child at bristol.gov.uk, but actually that's a very online form, and we have to have a central point for all children, regardless of why they're coming into social care. So we can capture data for the Department of Education, and we can know the kind of children that need support in our city. So really, we have to have a central place. In that online form, if you write in the clear box why you're asking for a service, and you put there your child has special educational needs or disabilities, and you like to talk to someone in the Disabled Children's Service, it automatically then comes through to the Disabled Children Duty Work team, and they can call you back. What will happen when a social worker calls you about that statutory assessment is they will ask you first what you'd like out of that assessment, because it's really important for us to make sure that you don't have to wait for the end of an assessment process to receive some support. And that's why you'll be asked that question. And then we can also ensure that whilst you're going through the assessment process, you are having everything that you can be getting linked into. So that's why you'll be asked that. What will then happen is if your child has an education, health and care plan, what we'd really like is our inclusion service to be invited to that review. Most schools now are very, very good at letting us know in social care that the reviews for your children are taking place, whether we've got an active part in your plan or not. And then if you would like social care to come in and step into that plan where they haven't previously been involved, the schools contact us and tell us you'd like us to be there. If that's not happening for you, please use the email address on the form here, the inclusion advice email, and we will then link in with the school with you to make sure that social care is part of that process. I've put the pathway to independence link in there as well, because obviously if your child is age 14 plus, as Alex has previously explained, you can have some support there. And if your child is over the age of 18, I'm saying child, apologies, young person, adult, over the age of 18, and you would like somebody involved from social care into that education, health and care plan, there is a referral pathway there for adult care services. Next slide, please. So there's not a waiting list for any of our services. You can email us and expect a response within 2 working days. For an assessment to be completed, we need to see your child within 5 working days of the referral. So we have very clear statutory timescales for a child in need assessment that we have to follow. Normally what happens is your online referral form will go into our first assessment team, and they will then send it to the Disabled Children's Service within 24 hours. 24 hours from there, it is looked at on the duty system and contact should be made with you about how the assessment process is going to take place. And with 5 working days, the child should be seen.
Okay, so I've just muted that person.
Okay. So when your child is seen, that would often be with you at home, or it may be that we see your child at school. That's completely discussed with you, and we work that assessment process out with you. Everything is joined up. So we also speak to the other professionals that are involved with you and your family, and we look at gaps and we identify needs, and we look at how we can meet your needs best for you and your family. Next slide, please. So for further information, what I've put here is parents have rights too. We're really, really mindful that in children's services, we do not do an additional parent carers assessment. It is in a child in need assessment. So we assess the needs of the parent carer there as well and make sure that the correct support is there for you. And we think family. We do not see the disabled child or child with special educational needs and or disabilities in isolation. We see that child in their family life and the support system in which they are helped. We really, really want to hear from you. Our Flora team email is here. If you have any ideas about how we can be doing things better, we really, really would like to hear from you. And I've sent Stuart a leaflet with the focus groups that are taking place on Eventbrite. Some of them are in the evening, some of them are during the day, because we're really, really aware in our service that the best people that can tell us how to make our service better is you. So we really, really want to hear from you. And I think that's the end from me.
Kate, thank you so much. There's a lot of information there and hopefully really useful information for parent carers to start to understand and get their heads around. I think particularly, I'm just thinking it was this slide here, that there's a lot of contact information on this slide that is about to, there we go, you've got it on your screen now. And probably too much to take in one go. And that's the benefit of us recording this, and you'll be able to come back to this at another point. So I do encourage you to come back and look at these at your leisure so that you can access that information. Kate, I'm also assuming this information is available on the local offer, which would be another way for parents to find that information.
Yeah, everything's on the offer. Yes. And what I have done in the last 24 hours is spoken to my colleagues that commission and organise all the activities over the holiday periods to make sure that's all going on the local offer as soon as we've got it. So we're committed to making sure our local offer is as updated as it can possibly be, as fast as it can possibly be.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Okay, everybody. So it's a huge pleasure to be able to welcome Jerry Bates, who's the Head of Children's Services with Savona Care and Health. Jerry, I'm going to be handing over to you now to take us through this session for the next 15 minutes. Just remind everybody who's still with us that we can't take questions during the workshop session. It is being recorded, and anyone not able to attend this session can access it at a time of their choosing. Jerry, over to you.
Oh, thank you, Stuart, and it's lovely to be here. I'm really sad that I'm not with you. I've been to a number of the Bristol Parent Carer conferences over the years, and I've always really enjoyed having the contact with all the families, as well as always the lovely lunch and the lovely tea breaks that we have. So it feels a little bit strange doing this when I can't see any of your faces and get any feedback, but I hope this session will be helpful for you. So I'm going to be talking about the Autism Hub. You may have heard about the Autism Hub, you may have seen some information about it, and that's what I'm going to be sharing today. So the autism diagnosis pathway, why did we need to change? You're going to need to click through on each one, please, Stuart, as we go. So if you can click. So first of all, parents and young people were telling us their stories. And we heard it repeatedly from all our parent carer forums. They wanted autism diagnosis assessments to be coordinated and faster. Thanks, Stuart. At one of our parent carer engagement events, a mum told me that she wanted to be able to get on a bus that was the autism bus, a metaphorical bus, and she wanted to stay on the bus with her child until the autism diagnosis was completed. She told us that she didn't know when the bus was going to come, and she said she didn't mind waiting as long as she knew when the bus would arrive. And she didn't want to get on a bus that was a speech and language therapy bus and then have to get off and get on another bus, like a community paediatrician's bus. So she wanted this to be a much more coordinated journey for her and her family. She talked about how some people seem to get on a different bus that took them there faster, and that the communication was poor. And that really stuck in my head about what we needed to achieve as a system for our parent carers and their children and young people. We had CQC Ofsted SEND inspections in all 3 of our local areas, so Bristol being one of them, and all of those CQC SEND inspections identified that the autism pathway wasn't coordinated enough and that communication was poor. Thanks, Stuart. We knew that there were long and variable waiting times, so not only were children waiting for a long time, that varied hugely across our area, both dependent on the locality and the age. Clinicians were telling us that they were feeling stressed and overwhelmed, not about the autism assessment itself, but about the trying to coordinate the assessment among a number of different clinicians who were involved in that pathway. Thanks, Stuart. And overall, there was a lack of a coordinated pathway, resulting in a disjointed journey for families and inefficient use of clinical resources. Thanks. Next slide, please. So what did we do? So, first of all, we drew up a specification in collaboration with the CCG, our clinical commissioning group, which described what we wanted the autism diagnosis process to look like across BNSSG. Then we started to think outside the box. We had a strategic project group for, it was ran for about a period of 2 years, and that included clinicians, it included CCG, it included a parent carer rep who was an equal member of that strategic group from the beginning, and a member of Barnardo's to represent child and young person's voice. We gave some families on the waiting list the choice of an online diagnosis using digital technology, which was called Helios, and some took that opportunity up. And we set up a project group. South Gloss Parent Carers provided a representative to that group, but represented both Bristol and South Gloss at that time before North Somerset had come on board with us. It became clear through all of the information and the feedback that we received that families wanted an autism hub. So they wanted a physical place to go to that was autism friendly, and that could provide diagnosis services as well as provide information and support services. And two key things were needed to get through the project. The one was money, and the CCG provided some funding. And the second was to identify a venue, and Bristol City Council very kindly provided Throgmorton House, which used to be called Ilminster Children's Centre, as a venue that we could deliver the hub in. Thanks, Stuart. Next slide. So what was the result? Sorry, back one, there we go. The Autism Hub, but what is this exactly? So it's a place where autism assessments for children and young people are streamlined. So most children and young people visit the Autism Hub on one visit only. It's not the case for all children and young people, dependent on the complexity of their need or what's required. But for the majority, they visit once. They're assessed in a single visit by a multidisciplinary team. The multidisciplinary team includes specialist speech and language therapists, community paediatrics, clinical psychologists and assistant psychologists, some specialist CAMS nursing, as well as CAMS clinicians, neurodevelopmental nurses, as well as some of our support workers. So referrals are made into the hub. And I'm going to talk in a little bit about who can make a referral. And those referrals are triaged by an expert triage. So that will always include a speech and language therapist and a paediatrician. And children who are presenting with mental health difficulties, there's a clinical psychologist who joins that triage. And at that point of triage, the clinical group make a decision about which diagnostic team is required to see that child. And then those assessments are booked in based on the team. So for some children, that might be that they need to have a developmental assessment with a paediatrician or a neurodevelopment nurse. And then they may need an ADOS, which is a specific autism assessment, perhaps with a clinical psychologist and a speech and language therapist. So it's very much bespoke and tailored to the needs of that child based on the referral information. So we heard from families what really matters to them, and recognise that the process can be what really worrying and needlessly lengthy, and that families don't understand and know all the steps in that autism assessment. So we hope that the new service can address that by making it clearer and more streamlined what the journey and the pathway is for a child or young person going through an autism assessment. And although the progress has been made, the hub is up and running. We were due to open in April, and due to the pandemic, we opened in August. We're aware that the waiting time for an autism assessment still remains unacceptably long. There's work going on both within the CCG and nationally, looking at autism diagnosis pathways and capacity. Our waiting times are between 18 and 24 months on the whole. Children are prioritised, and I'll talk about that in a moment. And that's typical, sadly, of the national picture. That's generally how long it's taking. We're aware that we don't have enough clinical capacity, so demand is outstripping capacity. Over the past 4 months, our referral rate to the Autism Hub has gone up 50%. Over the last year, it's prior to this 4-month period, it was going up a third every month. So there's an incredible demand out there that we need as a system to work out how we're going to manage. Thanks, Stuart. Next slide. So who can access the hub? So children and young people from 2.4 years up to their 18th birthday. As I said, all referrals are triaged by an expert clinical triage team and RAG rated, and so that's they're rated as red, amber or green. And the children that are seen as a priority are children who are rising school age, so children who are due to start reception, children who are in year 6 and are doing that important transition piece to move into secondary school, young people who are 16 years and older, recognising that from their 18th birthday, that CCHP, the Children's Community Health Partnership, no longer provides that care and they move over to adult services. Children and young people with a complex mental health presentation, and if that's deteriorating or at any point, information can be provided for re-triage if that child or young person needs to be prioritised on the list, and children in care are part of our priority list as well. Thanks, Stuart. So who can refer? When we started the Autism Hub, we opened the front door very wide, so anybody can refer. So you as a parent carer can refer, a young person with capacity can refer themselves, SENCOs, teachers, early years providers, all the health professionals who would have referred previously when the referral pathway was different. So a GP, a health visitor, a school nurse, any of the therapists, occupational therapy, speech therapy or physiotherapy. So basically anybody. It is a wide open front door and absolutely anybody can refer into the hub. Thanks, Stuart. I realise this is a bit of a busy slide, but I'll talk you through it. We're aware that our information on our website is far from perfect, and I apologise for that, and we are working on that. So on the website, if you go into the CCHP Autism Hub website, and the website's provided for you there, and click on the Clinicians tab, on the left-hand side, there's an autistic spectrum condition referral information and forms. What we need completed is we need a single point of entry form completed, which provides data about your child in terms of kind of contact details. There's a section on there around schooling, and there's a section for you as a parent if you're making the referral to describe what your child's needs are and anybody else who's been involved in with your child's care. All the referrals need to be accompanied by social communication questionnaires, and these are questionnaires which look at a really wide range of areas associated with an autism spectrum diagnosis. So it's looking at areas around communication, around social imagination, around friendships, around emotional understanding, and repetitive and restrictive behaviours. And there's a form for parents to fill in, a questionnaire which rates lots of different statements and provides you with some free text space. There's different forms for early years providers or school providers, different one for primary and secondary age, and also there's one for your young person. So if your young person was able to complete that form and send it back. And you as a parent carer, if you're making that referral, you would send in the referral form along with those social communication questionnaires, either to the email address that's provided there, which is our single point of entry, or you can post that into our single point of entry team. Thanks, Stuart. So if you have any questions about that, acknowledging that it isn't as clear as it should be, then please contact our Autism Hub. We have 3 fantastic admin coordinators who are just available on the end of a phone or on an email address. So give them a call. They can help you to go through the process if it's not making sense to you. They can give you some support in completing the questionnaires. They can let you know if your child has already been referred to the Autism Hub, where they are on the waiting list and how long the time is likely to be. So yeah, if you have any questions at all, do give them a call. They're really keen and able to answer any of those questions. We know that our work on the Autism Hub still has quite some way to go. We continue with our strategic project groups. We have a parent carer rep on that project group, and we're looking at a number of different projects, some of which you may hear about in the coming months. So one is a digital project to improve both accessibility of information on the website, to investigate the possibility of an e-referral, which would mean that you could complete a form and then press send, and it would arrive to us rather than all the steps in between that we currently have. There's another project that we are exploring with the CCG around parent navigation. And we've explored that with our parent carer organisations as well. So that's something that we would very much like to progress. We know that parent carers are telling us that the process can feel bewildering and overwhelming, and that having a peer supporter who has experienced that process and who can get alongside a family to help them negotiate and navigate their way through that process would be supportive. So that's something that we are exploring and investigating too. We are delighted that we have got some additional clinical capacity. So we have 2 clinical psychologists starting in April, and we have a new assistant psychology post that's out for recruitment. And our community paediatricians who provide input into the hub, the referrals that are coming straight to community paediatrics, potentially from your GP, for example, if the referral suggests that your child or young person's primary need may be an autism diagnosis, then those referrals are being redirected to the Autism Hub. So as a result of that, our community paediatricians are allocating more of their clinical capacity to the Autism Hub, all of which will help improve our waiting times and ensure that we move through the assessments for your children and young people faster. But if you have anything at all that you wanted to ask me, any suggestions that you had, I think that Stuart's going to collate some of those questions and suggestions and send those through to me, and I'm very happy to respond individually to families if they had specific things that they wanted to raise or questions that they wanted to ask. Thank you.
Jerry, thank you so much. That was a really detailed presentation, and again, I hope lots of really useful, helpful and interesting information. So I'm going to go to Anna Lipscomb, who is a senior educational psychologist and is going to be presenting this workshop on mental health for us today. Just again, need to remind everybody that we won't be taking questions during this workshop. It is being recorded so that anybody who hasn't been able to join today will be able to watch it at a time of their choosing. Anna, I'm now going to hand over to you, and the session is yours. And just let me know when you want me to move slides on. Just need to warn you that I'm not asleep when you ask me to move slides on. There's just a lag between moving on my computer and them appearing on your screen.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you, Stuart. So hello everybody. I can only echo what Jerry just said, that it feels very strange not being able to see everybody here, but a big hello from me, and really happy to be here nonetheless. I'm also really happy to be here because it wasn't actually supposed to be me who was here. So I am, as Stuart said, a senior educational psychologist at Bristol City Council, and I'm actually standing in for one of my colleagues, Dr. Duncan Gillard, who's another senior educational psychologist who unfortunately can't be here today, but he is actually the lead officer for this area. And I guess this area is quite different from the others that you've heard about today, mainly because it's not a service in itself, but it is a very significant, a particularly significant area of need with the current context that we're in and the global pandemic, thinking about children and young people's mental health very, very carefully. But there are lots of different services that would be inputting into this area. So although we are educational psychologists and a huge amount of our work is around the area of mental health and supporting young children, young people's mental health, there are a number of other services that I'll make reference to who are also inputting into this very important area as well. So what myself and Duncan were asked to come and speak to you about is about our kind of renewed prioritisation of mental health across the city, and how really we identify, how we assess mental health needs, and how do we meet those needs of children, predominantly in school, although I'll also be talking about how we support children's mental health outside of school contexts as well. So as you'll be very well versed by now, my brief has been the same as everybody else's. We're going to have a little think about the context of mental health first, and the context of this work. And then I'm going to talk a bit about who has access to it, what it is, and how access can be given to these services. Thank you, Stuart. Actually, just before we start, also, I'm aware that you've already heard from Jenny Maxwell about the educational psychology service and lots of the services that we do offer aside from this mental health aspect. So if you are interested in the educational psychology service in general, then have a listen back to Jenny's talk as well, which will tell you a little bit more about what EPs do across the city. But as I say, this is specifically around our mental health context for our children and young people. So the big reason why this area has been, it's always been such a major focus, obviously, of a lot of work that goes on across the city, but the reprioritisation of this area and rethinking about this area occurred as a result of a local area inspection, which happened in April last year. And as part of that, a number of changes, as I'm sure lots of you are aware, were needed across the city and across services within the city. And it led to some written statements of action about different areas which detailed what needed to change and how we were planning on changing those things. And that was about the local area working together in partnership. So that's why I say this is not just the educational psychology service, it's a number of services across the city. So one aspect of this written statement of action, and the aspect that I'm talking to you about today, is how we identify, assess and meet the mental health needs of children and young people across the city's educational settings in particular. And as I say, Dr. Duncan Gillard is the lead officer. Both he and I are happy for you to contact us about any of this going forwards. So Duncan was asked to look at 4 main areas when thinking about reprioritising children's mental health going forward. I'm just going to talk to you a little bit about each one of those strands of this work. So the first one is about a universal system across all Bristol school settings of how we screen children's mental health. And the idea of doing that is so that we can identify where there are any issues with children's mental health and we can intervene early. We can make sure that we are reaching out to every child within the school population and that we are identifying what those needs are, and then we can move forward thinking about supporting that school with an intervention plan for that child and having more positive outcomes for that child as a result. That is at quite an early stage at the moment, so Duncan has been working very carefully with a team of people to think about how we do that screening in the best possible way so that we find the right children to be working with and do the work that's going to make a difference with them. So that you're all aware of what's happening now, so between now it's already underway and until the end of July there is a pilot project going on with some of our schools across the city, about 10 schools, half primary, half secondary, where we're using 2 measures of mental health. That's the PASS and the GCI, which you're welcome to come and contact us if you want more information about. And what we're initially doing is using those measures to see how effective they are at picking up children's mental health concerns and helping school to plan next steps. So we're rolling out those measures across these 10 different schools in this pilot phase, and all of that data will be coming back to us by the end of July, and then we can think about whether those measures are the right measures for us to use, whether we need to adapt them in any way, but it can help us think about how we would then use that information to support schools and ultimately to support our children and young people in the best possible way in terms of their mental health. So from September, that project will be moving on to its next phase, which will eventually mean that across the whole city, all children are screened for their mental health and appropriate intervention be put in place. The second strand, number 2 on the slide, is the development of a training package. And that's something that Duncan is coordinating, but it's run predominantly through CAMS, so Children and Adolescent Mental Health Services. And that is a training package for schools predominantly, and it's to help them to be more effective in their assessment of children's mental health needs. It covers a whole range of different areas around eating disorders and urgent mental health needs, school-based anxiety, and issues relating to autism spectrum conditions as well. So there are lots of different areas to that. And that is almost in its final stage of development for a kind of late summer, autumn rollout of that training package. Another strand to this work is something that's been developed, number 3 on our list, within the Educational Psychology Service, which is called MELSA, and that stands for Mediating Learning Support Assistance. So you may or may not have heard about a big project that runs throughout our city called ELSA, which is Emotional Literacy Support Assistance, which again is another programme created and run by educational psychologists, where we're training support assistants across the city to support children's emotional literacy. And this is a brand new programme, MELSA, which is looking at the learning side of how we support our children in schools, and obviously looking after their mental health will be a theme that runs throughout that package of support. So what that package of support is a training package for support assistants across Bristol schools to help, particularly through learning, think about where children are, moving their learning on to the next step and supporting their mental health as part of that. The final stage, and maybe one that you all might be interested in following up on a little bit because it is not live yet, is Duncan has been involved in developing a catalogue of mental health services. So these are pulling together all of the services, all of the work that is out there at the moment to support children's mental health, either directly or through staff wellbeing or through training and different elements. Now, there are about 30 plus services within that document. They are all clearly detailed within that document. They've all got clear evidence base to them, and that catalogue will be available from mid-April on the local offer website. So you should all be able to see that. I'll just give you a little idea of some of the things that are on there. So broadly speaking, there are three main areas to that catalogue. There's training for schools, and the CAMS package that I mentioned earlier is part of that. But then there's a whole host of other training packages for schools, things like therapeutic story writing and thinking about the NHS 5 Ways to Wellbeing initiative, thinking about emotion coaching, ELSA, as I mentioned before, bereavement, self-harm, many different areas of training for schools and school staff. Another area to that catalogue is staff wellbeing, so direct support for staff's own wellbeing and then thinking about their own mental health to give them capacity to more effectively support our children's mental health in schools. So a couple of examples of that are group-based acceptance and commitment therapy, ACT support for school staff. Another example of that is VERP, which is video enhanced reflective practice. So it's when a psychologist would work alongside a staff member or a group of staff members and using video to help them to think about aspects of their actions and interactions with others. And then obviously a huge part of that catalogue document is about our direct work with children and young people, and that really varies within this document. And that's why I say once it goes live in mid-April, have a look for yourselves. So there's lots of really interesting, useful things on there. So going from things like activity packs for children, which are provided by Unique Voice, and that is particular activities and support that can be done at home or in school settings around thinking about post-COVID-19 and thinking about post-pandemic and how we support children with their thoughts and feelings to do with that. There is also direct bereavement support within that package for children. There is detail about CAMS, consultation service about individual children, and educational psychology service, consultation services about individual children and their mental health needs, how those are accessed, what the costs are, what the evidence base is, and who they would be appropriate for will all be detailed, as well as also direct therapeutic interventions, so one-to-one or group interventions for young people. For example, also within the acceptance and commitment therapy brief, there is a DNAB model, which is therapeutic individual intervention for young people, helping them to develop their cognitive flexibility to think about their thoughts, their feelings and their actions in a different way. And also similarly to VERP, a video enhanced intervention called VIG, which is video interaction guidance, which is working with the adults around a child, again, getting them to think about their communication, their interactions to improve relationships and improve mental health. And that is just a snapshot. So there are a huge amount of documents in that catalogue that Duncan has been pulling together. And as I say, look on the local offer from mid-April. All those will be detailed along with how they are accessed. Okay, thank you, Stuart. Next slide. So just to give you a little overview, so when we're thinking about children's mental health needs, about the identification, assessment and meeting needs, this is about all children and young people across Bristol schools, but also in home settings where appropriate, depending on the intervention that you're seeking. But 0 to 25, there are lots of initiatives that are very relevant for different age phases, but across that whole 0 to 5 age range, there will be some services to meet students' needs across those age phases. And then, of course, there is the training and skill development of school staff as well. What there is, so there are training packages, as I mentioned. There is that universal social emotional mental health screening being piloted that's going to be rolled out across the city. And then there's the catalogue of services. So how to access that? The universal screening will eventually, once it's finished its pilot phase, be available to all, and any follow-up available to all children across our school settings. And as I say, the catalogue of services is available 0 to 25 across all school settings, and for children at home where relevant. It will depend on the service that you're looking for, and all those individual services are detailed in that report. Okay, so I think that is everything for me. As I said, if you need to contact either myself or Duncan Gillard, who's the lead officer, but unfortunately can't be here today, you're more than welcome to do so. Our names are on the first slide, and our email addresses would simply be, for me, anna.lipscombe@bristol.gov.uk. So for Duncan, duncan.gillard@bristol.co.uk. And it would always be lovely to hear from you. So many thanks for inviting us here, and I hope that gives you a bit of an overview.
Anna, thank you so much. And again, an awful lot of information, and thank you for doing it so succinctly in exactly the amount of time that we gave you. I know that that is no mean feat at all, and it does sound like the catalogue is going to be especially useful. So please do look out for that on the local offer when it becomes available from April time. To be able to introduce Dawn Butler, who is the Early Years Manager of Inclusion, and she'll be presenting this workshop on early years for us. Again, just in case there's anybody new who's joined for just this session, I need to remind everyone that we won't be able to take questions during the workshop, and it is being recorded, and that means that anybody who hasn't been able to attend today will be able to watch it at a time of their choosing. Dawn, can I now hand over to you, please, and just tell me as you want me to move the slides forward.
All right, thank you very much. As Stuart said, my name's Dawn Butler, and I work in the Early Years and Childcare Service in Bristol City Council. I'm one of the managers, and one of my roles is to ensure that there are services available for vulnerable children, which includes children with SEN. So if you just want to go to the next slide. So hopefully I'll be able to provide the information based on the questions that you've asked me about who the services are for, what we do, and how you can contact us or access any of the services. Okay, so if you do the next slide, please. The early years service, sorry. The Early Years Service provides services and support for all children in Bristol under 5 years of age. We offer a wide range of support to all early years providers in the city as well. But today I'm just going to focus on the support and services we offer for children with SEN. In Bristol, we aim to provide special educational needs provision for children in the early years that we plan jointly and are delivered so children and families are able to access equitable services and provision across the city. We've got a range of early years providers who deliver early education and childcare opportunities for all children. And like, you know, that's nursery schools, our children's centres, playgroups, day nurseries, and also we've got childminders. There is support available in early years for the practitioners who work in all of those settings, and that's coordinated by our early years supported and inclusion team. If you go to the next slide, please. I've broken down into the areas of the support we offer for parents and early years settings, which includes our 350 childminders we have in the city. There's just a couple of general things to say as well. In Bristol, in early years, we do encourage all children to have a SEN support plan, and that's been in place for many years within the early years. The support plan is then transferred when the child goes to school, and obviously schools are sort of going to be implementing those soon as well. And also we do have our differentiated early years outcomes, which parents may know as the DAO. And this is a document that helps practitioners to monitor the small steps in progress to identify targets within the areas for development for children under 5. So I'll now just go through what we do for support for children and families. So the next slide, please. We offer a home visiting, educational and support service, which is called Portage. And this is for children from birth to 4 years old, and it is through a referral process. We provide home visits for families either weekly, fortnightly or monthly, and that depends on the needs of the child but also the needs of the family as well. If families have got a lot of appointments that they need to go to, and that, you know, they may feel that they only want support every fortnight. We aim to just help the parent and the child learn together and play together. We provide targets that can support the child to develop, and any ideas for play and teaching activities for the parents. It's just helping to get the child ready to move on to their next stage of education. Normally in the early years it is starting a nursery school. Our enhanced provision childminding. So in Bristol, we've got a scheme which provides 12 hours a week of childcare for children mainly under 2 years of age who meet the criteria. And this is a referral process from a professional working with the family. And we have got a dedicated group of experienced childminders who have accessed additional training in relation to special educational needs and disabilities. And so we use them to provide the care for children with SEND. We've got our rainbow stay and play groups. These are run in all of the 3 areas of the city, and they're a weekly drop-in group specifically for parents and carers with a child who's got special educational needs. During the school holidays, these move into our holiday stay and play groups, and they're open every week. And they are run for parents and those children, but also siblings up to the age of 10 years old to attend. For our early education, we do have a member of the team who provides dedicated support for parents whose children are eligible for free early education when they turn 2. And this is due to the child being allocated DLA, or the parents are accessing certain benefits. We receive this information from the Department for Work and Pensions, and then we make direct contact with the parents to support them in the application process and ensuring the transfer into the setting is smooth and a positive experience, both for the child and their parents. And we can ensure that any training that staff needs is able to be accessed. We're lucky in the team to have 2 members of staff that are regional trainers for Makaton. So they will provide Makaton training for parents. And we, in early years, we jointly fund some early support practitioner posts, and we fund these with the Community Health Partnership, and their aim is to work on a one-to-one basis with parents, just offering emotional and practical support for them. If you want to go to the next slide, please. So this is about support to early years providers. We have our Portage and Inclusion team who will go in and do 6 visits a year to all early years settings in Bristol. And they'll just offer advice and guidance to the practitioners. They'll talk through any of the children that they've got any concerns about. They also offer a training programme. And this is available for all early years practitioners. And last year, due to the COVID thing, we opened it out to reception class teachers as well. And that was really good, and we had a good response. So we will be offering that again this year. They also offer bespoke in-house workshops. So these are available for early year settings at their inset days or, you know, any team meetings. Sometimes staff will need training in certain medical needs, and again the team can support them in signposting and accessing those kind of needs if they need them. And the team also provides SENCO cluster meetings. So these are for all early years SENCOs in settings, and they happen 6 times a year. And there's one in each of the areas across the city. And again, it's just to make sure that the SENCOs feel supported and have all the, you know, the right information and things so they can support the children and the families that are attending. There's disability access funding. So this is a funding stream to support children with disabilities. It's known as the DAF, and it's available for all 3-year-olds, 3 and 4-year-olds who are in receipt of DLA. And if they are, the settings will receive a one-off payment each year of £615. And that is to support that provider in making sure the child can access the setting. The next slide, please. So we have a few other things that the Portage and Inclusion team can offer. So we have an inclusion support package. So this is where we have a member of our team known as an inclusion practitioner will go in and provide support to the setting. They'll model good practice to for those children and just do that on a 6-week block. We also have an agreement with the ASD team, so we do fund, BACT team, sorry, we do fund 2 members of their staff, so they will go in and support children in the early years who have a diagnosis of ASD. They're also just recently looking at going in for children that are on the pathway as well for an ASD assessment. We also fund an educational psychology consultation if needed. So this would be in partnership with parents. A referral can be made for an assessment to be carried out on an individual child. We've also got additional funding that settings can apply for from our early years SEN panel. This panel meets on a monthly basis and it's a multi-agency panel. A setting can make an application to enable them to support the child within their early years environment. And we also have specialist equipment funding. So if a child needs any specialist equipment in their early years setting, we can liaise with the therapist and we fund this and arrange its delivery, and that goes with them into school if needed as well. So next slide, please. Like I said before, we do have 350 childminders across the city, so we do have dedicated support for them. We can provide support from our inclusion practitioner who, if they've got a child who has got special educational needs or disabilities, they can go in and they can support them in doing any paperwork that's needed, setting targets, liaising with other agencies and things. We provide also a dedicated SENCO. So one of the members of my team is a SENCO for the childminders, so they can contact, because as you know, childminders work alone, so they can contact our dedicated SENCO for offering advice and guidance and things. And we do have a dedicated training programme for childminders, and included in that we do have 3 in particular that are in relation to SEND, and that is just about like an introduction for them, identifying needs, including speech and language and communication, and there's one that focuses more on safeguarding. So the next slide, please. This is about how you access. So like I said before, Portage is through a referral form. This can be from a professional or parents can apply themselves. Enhanced provision childminding is a referral from a professional as children need to meet a certain criteria. The early support practitioners are a referral from a professional. And the dedicated support to access 2-year-old entitlement is the 2-year-olds do have to have either DLA or they meet the criteria based on their parents' economic situation. Okay, next slide, please. And where are the time? Support from families are Rainbow Stay and Play groups. They're open access. They happen weekly in each area of the city. And the Holiday Stay and Play, they're open access as well during all of the school holidays. Obviously, over the last year, it has been slightly different, but this is our mainstream offer. And the Makaton training for parents, that is open access. If parents are keen, if they've got a child under 5 and they'd like to access training, they should just let their child's early year settings know, and they'll contact the team and put their name down on the list, sort of thing. And there's not a waiting list as such, but when we've got a group of parents together, then we'll deliver a training session then. Okay, next slide, please. All of our support to our settings is or self-access. They can take part in any of the visits. We offer them to all of our providers. Training, they can just access when they want, and also the SENCO clusters are open to all. The DAF is available for children who claim DLA. Next slide, please. I think it's just about, yeah, and like I said, the support for our childminders is is just at their request, really, and they can just ask for it if they want it. And the last slide, I think, then, please. That's it. So waiting lists, that was a question as well. We don't really have an issue with waiting lists. Once a child is referred for our portage or enhanced provision, they're contacted straight away to let them know if they're eligible or not. And we aim to offer something to the portage children, even if it's just one visit every month to initially, until we can build up to weekly sessions. And for enhanced provision, it depends on the area really, and the availability of childminders, and then we do prioritise children there with those with the highest level of need. And that is me over. If you've got any information, any further information you would like, it's on the Bristol City Council main website, on the local offer website. And if you've got any direct questions, just feel free to email me, and you can email me. The contact details are on there through Ask CYPS. And other than that, that is me finished.
Dawn, thank you so much, and it's a huge thank you for persevering with technology.
I apologise for that this morning. Yeah,
it's not your fault. I say really against us today. I'm so glad that you came in, you stayed with it, and I'm really grateful to you for delivering that session at the end for us. And it just shows what an appalling job I did in your absence earlier on, trying to do my best to go through your slides. So I'm glad that everybody has the correct and detailed information from you. I can't tell you how grateful I am. That is it in terms of the workshops today. I do want to say thank you again to everybody for attending, our parent carers for bearing with us and being so understanding when we have struggled so much with the technology, but I do hope that you've managed to get something out of it. For those of you who are listening to this as a recording, I hope that it is providing you with some of the information about some of the services within the local offer. As I said at the very beginning, this is the very first time that we've done it, so there were bound to be some glitches, and it certainly tested us, but we stayed with it, and you stayed with it, and I want to say a huge thank you to you for doing that. I need to say a big thank you to everybody again who has presented this morning, and for the team within Bristol Parent Carers for supporting me to pull this together. especially to Dennis, who has supported with people who had issues trying to join this morning, to Heather, who has supported with sending out confirmation of bookings for parents who've requested one-to-one sessions this afternoon. And last but not least, to Sarah, who has worked, I can't tell you how hard behind the scenes to make this happen and to resolve some of our technical glitches today. I really could not have done it without you, so I am so very grateful. I'm going to close the session now. Those of you who have booked a one-to-one session this afternoon will have had those details, and you'll have the joining link, so you can just go in and join your one-to-one session, and fingers crossed it'll be a lot smoother this afternoon than it has been at times this morning. Once we close the session, the software will populate a recording for us, and we will put those on the Bristol Parent Carers website as soon as possible, so that you can go there to watch it again and catch the detail from some of those slides, which was so helpful. So this is me saying goodbye and thank you, and when it comes, please have a good weekend, stay safe and look after yourselves, and we look forward to seeing you all again soon. So take care and goodbye, everybody.